Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Aaron and this is MindScience episode 15. The famous Indian sage Ramana Maharshi had a saying that goes like this: one cannot attain liberation by trying to pluck each leaf off of the tree, for more leaves will just continue to grow. To attain liberation, the whole tree must be uprooted. And what this saying means is that you can try to transcend the ego by dealing with one thought at a time, and this will help you make some progress, but it will not ultimately lead you to the true and lasting freedom that you're looking for. In order to be fully liberated from the illusion of the separate self, then the person itself must be recognized as an illusion. I can only speak from personal experience, but nothing has given me more inner peace than coming to the realization that this little me I had taken myself to be my entire life does not actually exist. Because it is this little me that is responsible for all of the psychological suffering that you ever experienced. But understanding why the little me is an illusion can be difficult for most people. So in this video, I'm going to do my best to simplify this concept for you. But it's worth being said that the concept is not the freedom, in the same way that the map is not the territory. All I can do is point you to this realization, but it's ultimately something you must see for yourself, where you have that aha moment, that insight, where you recognize that the story is an illusion. That and that alone is what brings liberation. One of the most misunderstood terms in non-dual spirituality is the word illusion. Oftentimes when I say phrases like, the world is an illusion, or suffering is an illusion, it triggers a lot of people to get angry in the comment section because they think I'm saying, what happened to you didn't really happen to you, moron. You just made it all up. So this is a word that needs to be adequately explained so that people can understand why phrases like suffering is an illusion is one of the most empowering and liberating truths you can hear. So I'll share with you my personal definition of illusion and then give you an example. An illusion is something that's existence depends upon you not understanding it. The moment you understand an illusion, it vanishes, because understanding undoes illusions. So if we use a piece of rope as an example, and I tie a knot in the middle of the rope, I'll ask you, does the knot exist? And you might say, yes, of course it exists. I can see it right there. So the mind identifies what appears to be a new object called a knot. But then I say to you, no, the knot doesn't exist. It's an illusion. And you might say, how dare you insult my intelligence? I can see the knot right there. You must take me to be a fool. But that's essentially how many people respond when they hear the phrase, suffering is an illusion. It doesn't mean that you don't experience suffering, because you obviously do. In the same way that you experience a knot the moment I identify it as a new concept. But what the phrase, the knot is an illusion means is that there is no knot apart from rope. The knot is just something the rope is doing. And so it gives the illusion like there's one thing called rope and another thing called knot, when in fact there isn't. Only the rope exists. So in using this analogy, I want you to follow me for a moment. When you think about your past, the way you remember it is exactly like your dreams at night. Memories appear to you as ethereal images in your mind and snapshots in time that you cannot be sure are any more real than your dreams at night. But the mind wants to carry these dreams forward in time and create stories out of them that define who I am in this moment. Yet all stories are illusions. They do not exist apart from me thinking about them. Only this moment exists, and in every now moment, I am born again. Free to be who I choose to be now. Free from all dreams of the past. So we can use this analogy to see why the person, the concept of self, is also an illusion. The person is a story. Our entire sense of self that we take to be real is just a story created from memory. There is no person without a story. If you remove the story, the person goes with it. What remains without the story and the concept of self? Only the perfect present moment, which contains no mental suffering, no fear, and no judgment. These things can only exist inside of a story that the mind creates. We tend to only see the world through concepts of past and future, but never as it actually is now. This is how the illusion of the person, and therefore suffering, is generated. We compare what is happening now to what we've experienced of the past or desire for the future. So in some fundamental way, we never interact with the real world. All of our time is spent dreaming. Our sleeping and waking dreams have different forms, but their content is the same. It is all illusion. Much of what we see is actually the ego's protest against reality. For example, let's suppose there are two people, one who has been single for 5 years and one who has been in a fulfilling relationship for 5 years. If you place the same thought in both of their heads, I am going to be alone forever, the reaction is completely different. The single person is tormented day and night by this thought, while the person in a happy relationship laughs it off as ridiculous and never thinks of it again. So the question is, which person had the correct interpretation of that thought? The answer is neither, because the thought is an illusion. The person who is single is dreaming of suffering. It only exists in their mind. If they could understand that this is just a thought and not reality, it would lose all of its influence. So this is why suffering is an illusion. It is an experience that can only happen from a story. When we suffer, we believe that I am the one who is suffering. This I who suffers is an illusion the mind creates. How can we be sure? Because the story, the suffering, and the sufferer are one singular experience. If you remove the story, then the suffering and the one who suffers it disappear with it. You cannot have a sufferer apart from suffering or a story. Therefore, the seemingly three separate things are one inseparable experience. There is no one who suffers. There is only the experience of suffering. This is not some clever trick you play on yourself to try and escape suffering, but a way of seeing life. When you catch a cold, there is no person having a cold, in the same way that there is no cold having a person, because that is a story the mind creates. Both are phenomenal, observed by awareness. You simply realize that you are, at this point in time, the experience of a cold. So you simply allow the experience without mentally resisting it. If you try to deal only with stories, the mind will simply create new ones. But if you uproot the illusion of I altogether, the mind has no more material to create illusions from. No subject, no story. Every illusion the mind creates relies upon the belief in a separate self who experiences it. And this is where true liberation and inner peace comes from. We fight against reality because we see it to be cold and cruel, and yet all we are fighting against is our own dreams of it. If we could see reality as it actually is, untainted by all of our false illusions and dreams, we would want nothing else than the real world. Most people try to love themselves by loving the concept of self that they have, based upon the stories that their mind has created about them. But you cannot find self-love this way. This fake I that you're trying to love isn't real. You cannot love a story, because all stories create suffering. Even our favorite memories of the best times of our lives become used as a tool by the ego to glamorize the past. And so we remember the good old days when things were apparently better than they are now, and we wish things could be like it was back then. And all the while, we overlook the gorgeous, immaculate perfection of the present moment. Memories in themselves are not a problem. The illusory I who supposedly experienced them is. Without the belief in a separate I who experiences experience, The mind cannot create a story out of memory. So here's a quick thought experiment that you can do. Look through your memories that are the most vivid to you and see if you can locate a separate subject who experienced them. What you'll find if you investigate this deeply enough is that even the so-called person is also an experience. What you were thinking, what you were feeling, the wind in your hair, the sight of the trees, the smell of the flower, and the person who felt, saw, and smelled them is all just a part of one indivisible experience. So this is the truth of the matter. The person does not exist. There is no separate I apart from experience. Your mind tries to localize your sense of self by convincing you that you are the body. And if you believe that, the illusion of a separate self apart from life is created. You cannot be the body because the body itself is also experienced. The body is also an inseparable part of this moment, and it cannot be separated out. You are that formless awareness which observes all experience. For example, when you're riding a bike, you are not saying to yourself, I am riding this bike right now. You are not referencing any story of self. In that moment, you are the experience of riding a bike. You are the whole thing. To realize this is to be perfectly present with life. This is what we call a flow state. Michael Jordan coined the term being in the zone and said,
it's a great feeling. It's like every move, every step, every decision that you make, it's the right decision. And we all want to be in that zone quite often.
Professional athletes know that the secret of the flow state is to never acknowledge the flow state. The moment you think to yourself, I am crushing it right now, you step out of the flow. The mind constantly creates this illusory I that claims credit for everything. Yet the reason you perform so well in a flow state is because that illusory I was not present for it. Without the concept of I who is doing actions, the body can read and react only to the present moment and perform to the best of its possible ability. Because the mind is too slow. It cannot keep up with the present moment because it has to think about it first, which puts it one step behind reality. So without the mind analyzing what you're doing, you become one with the present moment. You become the universe in motion, reality experiencing itself. And so this is the truth of the matter. There is no I who can be separated from this moment. The experience and the experiencer are one. Neither can exist without the other, which means that just like space and time, they are one and the same. So how does this realization bring us freedom? It means that the gravity of the past no longer pulls us, no longer convinces us that we are something else than what we are now. It frees us from the illusion of the personal self and all of its sad stories, and allows us to experience the liberating joy of the present moment. You are what you experience, and just like when you awaken from your dreams at night, you realize that you were not just the dreamer, but the whole dream itself. It is only concepts that separate us from reality, but concepts are illusions. The present moment is not telling you that you are lonely, incomplete, or depressed. Only a concept can tell you that. And this is what the Course in Miracles means when it says, salvation can be seen as nothing more than the escape from concepts. Most people are afraid of having the realization that their precious concept of self is an illusion. The ego says, oh, come on now. You can't go through life without a manufactured sense of self, can you? You'll just become some inert, brain-dead moron who sits on the couch all day. But of course, nothing about you is lost, except for that which was never real to begin with. When someone calls your name, you still turn around, but you don't bring all of your stories with you. The ego would have you believe that dissolving this illusory sense of self is the worst thing that could ever happen to you. And most people believe it, so the most that they ever do is tiptoe to the ledge to take a peek at freedom. but they never make the leap of faith themselves. The ego will fight to its last dying breath to keep you from having this realization, because it knows that this is its annihilation. So don't be afraid to go all the way. The mind knows nothing of freedom, so all it can tell you about it are lies. The separate self cowers in fear before the altar of freedom. It would rather any other fate come to it than this. But all that happens when the shift is made is peace everlasting, or as Christ referred to it, the kingdom of heaven. And if any man wants to be my disciple, let him first die to his concept of self. Enlightenment takes nothing from you but your suffering. So just keep asking this question: who am I? And allow the silence that follows to answer you. As often as you suffer, question the one who is suffering. And the more you question this, the more you will begin to see that it is not there. This separate self I believe myself to be, and all of its pain, is just a story in the mind. It is not there in reality. It can never be found in this present moment. The truth is that we fear our freedom far more than our bondage. Our bondage is at least familiar, but freedom is entirely unknown. Who would I be without my past? What would I become if I released all my stories and forgave everyone? I might become lost and confused, all alone with no story. This will be the ego's final concession to you before you step into heaven. It would have you believe that bondage is actually freedom, and freedom is death. Yet this can only be true for the ego, whose entire existence depends upon keeping you in chains, bound to the illusion of the person. If you would set yourself free, you would see that without my past, there is unbroken peace. Without guilt, there is only joy. And without fear, there is perfect love. Everything in the ego's world is unreal and untrue. But you will only cross the bridge from illusions to the truth once you see that on the other side is freedom. And here there is nothing but shadows and dust.